Following motion that I've already given notice of, and has been the 48 hours, and it is that given the Ukrainian armed forces are in desperate need of more munitions, and the armed forces of Ukraine have officially requested Canada donate surplus CRV7 rockets to Ukraine to aid them in defending their sovereign territory from Russia's illegal invasion, and that given the Canadian Armed Forces are in possession of 83,000 CRV7 rockets that are slated for decommissioning and will cost taxpayers money to dispose of, therefore the committee report to the House that the Government of Canada immediately donate all surplus CRV7 rockets to the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Now, Mr. Chair, there was a letter that came that has been circulating online. I think everybody saw it, but the Ukrainian Armed Forces made a request back on November 24th to the government through the military attaché, the Canadian military attaché in our embassy in Kiev, knowing that we have these antiquated CRV7 rockets. And just so everybody's aware, the CRV7 rockets are actually originally manufactured by Bristol Aerospace at the Rockwood Propellant Plant, which is, interestingly enough, is in my riding. And these rockets were all built between 1984 and 1994. So we're talking 30 to 40 years old. And the Ukrainians realize, as does the Canadian Armed Forces, that they are in a situation where they could be becoming destabilized, and they have twice now, the Canadian Armed Forces have issued RFPs to decommission and dispose of the rockets. There is hazardous materials in them, such as asbestos and TNT and C4.
Mr. Chair, could I interrupt with a point of order?
Yes.
With all due respect, James, can we release the witnesses then?
Yes,
They're very, very important people who are sitting here. You could have 15 of these motions. So can we just release our
I'm good with that.
Have the
Witnesses has to come back anyway, so.
Yeah, they'll be back on Monday.
They could.
Actually,
Absolutely. They could speak to it a whole lot better than we all could.
Yes, okay, well, apparently we're not going to hear from experts today. No. I want to thank you for your patience, all of you. We appreciate your consideration, and no doubt we will see you again. Don't know when. So thank you for your...
And apologies to our witnesses as well.
No, this is the way the system works, so we're not apologizing. They all know. Okay. Mr. Fisher apologized, Madame Lalonde apologizes, but the chair is not apologizing. So with that, thank you again for your presence here. And if we could stop with the bickering and focus on what Mr. Bazan has to say. Are you finished?
No, I just carry on, and I do appreciate that. And I do thank our witnesses for coming today, and we'll look forward to see them soon, along with the minister. And so I'll stay on topic rather than go off. So anyway, with these CRV7 rockets, in the letter that's been circulated online. It does show that the Ukrainian military are aware of the status of these munitions, but they want all of them. If they can be transported to Ukraine, they will go through the stockpile and use what they can, take parts from the other rocket motors to build more rockets, and utilize whatever warheads that we have on inventory. These are all sitting around collecting dust at CFB Dundurn, south of Saskatoon, and it's going to cost the taxpayers of Canada millions of dollars to dispose of these rockets. Some estimates I've heard is up over $30 million to dispose of these 83,000 rockets. So rather than waste taxpayer money and having to go through the whole process again of trying to find some entity in Canada or the United States that will dispose of these rockets, let's give them to the Ukrainian military. Let them use these rockets to actually defend their homeland. Let them push back on the Russian invaders. all the talk around carbon pricing and carbon taxes, and that because us as conservatives, we don't support a carbon tax, and that's why we voted against the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. Look, we are the party of free trade. We negotiated the first free trade agreement, and guess what? The bill C-57 has passed, and so let's do the next best thing right now, and that is to send over the munitions and supplies that Ukraine needs. Now, the government has made lots of announcements of munitions, and we keep hearing about, over 12 months ago, January of 2023, the promise was made to buy a NASAMS, a National Air-to-Surface Automatic Missile System, to defend airspace in Ukraine from an American contractor. $406 million. Guess what? The NASAM has not been ordered. 12 months past the fact, and nobody knows where the $406 million is. Zelensky has asked for the NASAM over and over again, and it's still not there, and they need it to defend their airspace. For those of us that follow what's happening in the war in Ukraine, things are getting desperate. The Russians continue to push. Avdiivka is going to be the next city to fall. The Ukrainians have positioned their Leopard tanks and Bradley tanks, as well as the Abrams tanks that they have, to try to hold the line against the brutal Russian military. And this is a chance for us to do some good, send over these missiles, and make a difference. They have already said, and if you saw the Globe TV news story that was out on Monday, they have built ground launchers to use these rockets from to help them defend territory. They also are interested in putting them on their drones. And we know that this war has changed the entire doctrine around warfare. I don't think anyone thought that we'd be back to tank warfare, but that's what this has turned into. Nobody thought that drones would be used to the effect that they have been. Nobody thought that the Russian Air Force would never be able to achieve air dominance and air superiority over Ukraine airspace. We have seen just recently again maritime surface drones used by the Ukrainian military take down Russian missile cruiser, a corvette, and only hit it with about 2 or 3 drones and sunk another ship in.
Mr. President, can you focus on the motion, please?
That is, I'm talking about Ukraine and defending Ukraine. And the CRV rockets can be used in these drones, is what I'm getting at, Mr. Chair. And so these CRV... brought it into relevance. Yeah, so the CRV rockets are going to be used in drones. So whether it be maritime drones, whether it be aerial drones, there is this huge opportunity to provide some major capacity to Ukraine, especially as our own munitions productions of things like 155 rounds are still stuck at 2,000 to 3,000 a month. The Americans are just ramping up theirs to double up to 100,000 rounds a month. Europeans haven't stepped up. So these are munitions and supplies Ukraine needs, and so I just encourage everyone on the committee to support the donation of these surplus weapons that are slated for disposal anyway. They aren't of any use to the Canadian Armed Forces since we've moved to guided missile systems like the AIM-7 and the AIM-9X Sidewinder and Sparrow missiles. So this is, in my opinion, a good use of taxpayer money by saving it, by not using it to dispose of these weapons, and will be gratefully appreciated by Ukrainian military and the citizens of Ukraine who are trying to save their country from Putin's war machine.
Madam Madsen.
I'm not inherently opposed to this motion per se, or of course sending munitions to Ukraine, helping Ukraine. I mean, to an earlier point made by Mr. Fisher and Ms. Lalonde, I think the member doth protest too much in terms of they're very defensive. Conservatives now have voted against the Ukraine free trade agreement and support to Op Unifier in December. Obviously, they're trying to save face to some degree. So I think that that's a problem. But ultimately, and certainly we haven't the ability to talk about increasing humanitarian aid or putting further sanctions on Putin, which I think that we need to do. But these arms, what my concern is here is that these, and the member, Mr. Bazan, even said it clearly, these aren't stable. They're dangerous. So D&D and the CAF personnel have...
Zan, if you could carry on a conversation somewhere else other than in the committee. Ms. Matheson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to send Ukraine the help that they need. It's why I voted for Op Unifier, and the support to the humanitarian aid missions. But the CAF and D&D, they have to go through that time period that they need in order to make really careful examinations of what they can or they cannot send. I mean, what would happen, and I would love to hear from my Conservative colleagues here, what would happen if there was an accident during transport? Who would be responsible for that? How could we live with ourselves if that was the case? And ultimately, yes, these are dangerous times, but I don't think that you go forward willy-nilly and just say, well, to cover my own butt, I'm going to put this forward.
Anyway,
Well, behind, whatever. But I'm not going to do that just so that I can save face. And I would really love to hear what the contingency plan is on that if there are problems and if there are tragic issues with this motion.
Lalonde, Fisher, Kelly, Gallant, Bazan.
Okay, I'm trying to. I really appreciate, and maybe through you, Mr. Chair, follow up a little bit on my colleagues. First of all, the department, CAF, is exactly doing this. We did identify just over 83,000 units of the CRV rocket motors for disposal. But one thing I think that we all collectively are acknowledging in that they've been in storage for many years. And I would be very displeased and very concerned that there would be unattended consequences with our own forces or our Ukrainian that we want to support of any decision that can be made. I think we can all agree that, the assessment is important. We also want to make sure that they actually work. And I am, unlike my colleague, certainly not an expert. I do believe in my D&D. I believe in our CAF. I believe in their expertise. So they are looking. They are following the way going forward. And we need to make sure, and I think on the point of Mrs. Madison, that they don't actually explode in the transport. And that would actually put our own troops, Mr. Chair, at risk. I will not pretend to be the expert, and that's why, for me, is that the intent. The department's doing this. We are assessing, as we always did as a government, with the support of most of the House. Sadly, recently, to one party that did not. We collectively want to help Ukraine. We said we will be there for as long as it takes. We voted in support. $2.4 billion has been already committed and continuing. So, Mr. Chair, on this is the fact that, again, the intent of, the epiphany of the Conservative, I really want to make sure that we're not putting anyone at risk, especially not our own troops, our Ukrainian troops. Merci.
Fisher.
I mean, it's hard to follow the last two speakers. I mean, Ms. Matheson hit, and I think that may have been your best. James, you and I have been friends for 8 years. We've traveled together. You are not a munitions expert. You didn't serve. I have no idea where all of the stuff that you just said came from. You could have made every bit of that up, and you could have really seriously put lives at risk. This is something, I think it's a great idea if they are safe. We've said we will help Ukraine, or at least our side of the house has said we'll do everything we can to help Ukraine. But let's not just rush into this. Let's, like Lindsay said, let's make sure we do the right things for the right reasons. And if these things are still good and we can use them, why wouldn't we want to help Ukraine to every extent?
Mr. Kelly, do you have something explosive to say?
No, I'm going to
It's gonna be a
though
dud.
begin by pointing out that I think Mr. Bazan actually does have some credentials around this table. Mr. Bazan has done Mr. McKay's job. He's done Madame Lalonde's job. He's been at this committee for a very long time, and he actually listens and pays attention to witnesses. He reads the reports. Mr. Bazan did not claim to be an authority on ordnance, but what Mr. Bazan knows and what we know is that the Ukrainian government has asked us to do this. Okay? This is not something that we are made. I'm going to ask you to maybe rein in the government's parliamentary secretary here when I have the floor. Again, this is something the Ukrainian government has asked. We are not suggesting there are not logistical concerns to be dealt with, but the government of Ukraine.
Reluctant as I am to caution colleagues, can we leave it to one speaker at a time? As Mr. Kelly, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are merely asking this committee to endorse what the government of Ukraine has asked Canada. That's all we are asking of this committee. Surely that's not too hard for us. Surely the Ukrainian government is aware of the risks involved in acquiring munitions that had been or are slated for decommission. And they understand and accept those risks. And in their judgment, this is something that's material to their war effort and something that we ought to support at this committee.
Ms. Gallant.
Okay. So we're hearing that the government is getting equipment over there, but what we're hearing on the ground is, yes, the equipment is sent overseas, but it doesn't get into Ukraine because the Foreign Affairs Minister doesn't put the final signature. They have some anathema to lethal weaponry, and it's costing their lives. For the first 2 years of this conflict, we were told this was Putin's expansionism. It was his attempt to reconstitute the USSR. But now, the ambassadors are telling us that this is part of a rebalancing of the power in the world, and that what Putin is actually doing, he's not going looking to invade individual countries for the sake of it and rebuilding his old empire, but it's to destabilize the West, take down our institutions. So this is far more serious, and they are fighting the war on their land so we don't have to lose blood and treasury on our soil. All that being said, and I know that the Liberals actually said yesterday they like to put the cart before the horse, and that's exactly what they did with the free trade agreement that wasn't needed, because if we don't have a Ukraine, there's no country to have a free trade
Ms.
agreement
Gallant,
with that we didn't need anyhow.
The motion is whether we are going to ship, Canada's going to ship munitions to Ukraine, the specified munitions, It's not a geopolitical discussion. It's not about anything to do with whether you like carbon tax or whether you don't. So if you could focus your comments on the motion itself that's in front of us.
They have asked for, Ukraine has asked for the ammunition. It's old. We don't need it. They can make something of it, recycle, reuse, and keep their country. They are fighting the fight for all of us. Let's give them the tools, the equipment, the ammunition they need to do so. And this motion allows some of that to be done.
Bazan, Normandine, Lalonde, Noor Mohammed.
So first of all, I don't think anybody argues about my experience in Ukraine and the people I know in Ukraine. So I was contacted through back channels in December asking for our support, for political support, for a military request from the military. And before I moved forward with this, I did all my background checking. One, to ensure that they can be utilized, that they hadn't been already contracted for decommissioning, and that there was a way to get them there safely. I have had conversations with the manufacturer. I've had conversations with those in the military and those that are familiar with the rockets, and I had conversations with the government of Ukraine. I have the letter in front of me from Lieutenant General Kirilo Budnanov, and I should just say that there is some stories out that he may be the next chief of defense of the Ukrainian armed forces with the changes that are taking place there right now. He is the chief of defense intelligence of Ukraine. And I'll just read his letter into the record, if that's okay, Mr. Chair. It says, Canada has been a solid ally to Ukraine, and I express my gratitude on behalf of Ukraine. Op Unifier has been invaluable and increased our warfighter survivability on the front as they have passed on the skills the Canadian Armed Forces taught. My international team recently met with Defense Attaché Nicholas Gauthier to discuss our request for the retired CRV7 rockets. I understand that the 83,000 CRV7 rockets, or CVR rockets, no, CRV, he's got it backwards. There's a high percentage that is not functional. However, Ukraine desperately needs munitions, and we have put a task force together to examine each of them if Canada is willing to entertain our request. The task force has identified the equipment needed to update and arm them. We hope to collaborate with the OEM and will work on the CRV7s in Ukraine at our munitions facility. They will be extremely valuable. I sincerely hope that Canada will consider my request. I want to reiterate my deep gratitude to Canada and its people for the continued support we receive. We cannot defend ourselves against Russia without it. And then, so that's dated November 24th, 2023. And then 2 days ago on Global News TV, he did another interview, and he again is urging the government to let Ukraine have the decommissioned CRV7 rockets. Doing so would help Ukraine fend off Russian forces and save taxpayers the cost of destroying them, said Lieutenant General Budanov. We hope it will be a win-win situation. So he's aware of the state of the rockets. He knows that they can utilize them. These rockets will have to be transported someplace. They can't be sitting in CFB Dundurn in perpetuity. They're just collecting dust, and they are potentially could become destable and create even a bigger problem for the Canadian Armed Forces if they're sitting in storage. So let's utilize them. They were used by the Canadian Armed Forces up until 2009. So I think that there is an opportunity here. As General Budanov said, it's a win-win. It's a win for Canada, it's a win for the Canadian Armed Forces, and ultimately it's a win for Ukraine.
Madame Normandine.
I don't want to claim that I'm an expert in ordnance, but from what I'm gathering from this motion, there isn't any comment about asking for the CRVs to be sent to Ukraine overnight. It's more about making them available to Ukraine. From what I understand in the media, there are studies that have already been done at Defense as to the safe transport of these munitions. But to declassify them, they'd have to be transported. There has to be security validation of them. That all has to be done. The way I read the motion, really is that it's referring to making these weapons available. I don't think anyone is going to overnight just decide to move them without doing any security checks. So in that sense, I'm in favor. I'm comfortable with being in favor of this motion as drafted, and I'm prepared to trust a defense for moving these munitions in a safe way.
You know what? I'll let others speak and I'll come back if that's all right.
Okay, Mr. Noor Mohammed, welcome to the committee. This is, I'm sure
Thank
you
you,
enjoy yourself immensely. Yes.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have been very interested in this conversation, particularly in respect of what we're now discussing. And I'm just sort of reflecting a little bit on the comments that we've heard from conservatives that we should do what President Zelensky and Ukraine has asked us to do. And so I think it's important, especially for those of us who may have forgotten, and all of you in this committee, Mr. Chair, may be much more familiar with this, but I was just reflecting on what we have done in terms of the military side of support for Ukraine. Since February, I think it's about $2.4 billion in military assistance, air defense missiles. I think there are surface air missile systems. We've seen Leopard battle tanks. There have been 208 armored vehicles, more than that, right? Almost 300 armored vehicles now. We've had howitzers. We've had ammunition. We've had drone resolution cameras, the whole 9 yards. Whatever Ukraine thus far has asked for, we have done. What I'm really surprised by, though, is that we're hearing from conservatives that we should do what Ukraine has asked when they voted against a free trade agreement that Ukraine asked us to do. They voted against funding for Operation Unifier. So I find it really rich for us to be sitting here talking about decommissioned rockets that may or may not work, that may or may not pose a threat to Canadian military that may have to ship them over. We don't know if they're going to work properly or not. From a party that has done none of the things that we've been asked to do.
Sorry, I'm having troubles following what you're saying because Ms. Lalonde and Ms. Manson, to a lesser extent, are carrying on this conversation that makes it difficult for those of us who wish to listen. So please continue. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're hearing. We really want you to listen to what the Ukrainians are asking for, what President Zelensky is asking for. In his own words, President Zelensky asked us for a trade deal that our government and Liberals and New Democrats and the Bloc supported. The Conservatives chose not to support. They said they wanted funding for Operation Unifier, which we stood up in the House and we supported, and Conservatives, including members of this committee that are sitting across, voted against. We have given the military support that Ukraine has asked for. In this particular case, they are making a case for rockets that may or may not work, that may or may not pose a threat to the Canadians that have to take them over. And I think we need to do all the investigative work that needs to be done before we sort of ask to send things over. But I do think it is important for Canadians to understand that the people across the way, these conservatives that are asking for us to do the things that President Zelensky asked to do, they should be looking themselves in the mirror and asking themselves and their leader why they were instructed to vote against funding for Operation Unifier and why they were instructed to vote against a trade agreement that Mr. Zelensky, President Zelensky, and Ukrainian people asked us to do not once, not twice, but every single time. So I think they have a lot of explaining to do, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Mr. Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You know, when I looked at the motion here today, it was hard for me to contain my emotion because I have a very large Ukrainian community in Hamilton East Stony Creek. I have a very large Ukrainian community in Hamilton, and the votes that my colleague just referenced are not just a slight to the Ukrainian president and his government. It's a slight to all those Ukrainians that we have living here in Canada. It is a slight to the 200,000 plus Ukrainians that we've let into the country. And I think when I read this motion here, it rings hollow because the member opposite and all the people that are sitting beside him, he had the opportunity to support Ukraine. They chose not to. I completely get the politics associated with this. In terms of the leader of the opposition, his quest to follow President Trump and the alt-right conservative movement.
Point of order,
in the
John.
United States.
You started off pretty good about keeping everybody relevant.
I appreciate that.
But we've gone way off here.
Yeah.
You got to bring these guys in.
I don't disagree. I have called the others to order that we are dealing with a motion about munitions.
The Prime Minister just.
Well,
I
think it's-
appreciate that President Trump is a rather explosive personality, but I'm
Well, I
hard
was going
pressed
to
to
get to
know
the
how
point
he's
that the leader of the
involved.
opposition, Mr. Chairman, has consistently undermined our efforts to support Ukraine. So whether you want me to use the word Trump or not, I can certainly avoid that comparison.
I want you to focus on the motion.
No problem. But this motion is about support for Ukraine. I think every single person who spoke around this table has referenced the fact that this motion represents support for Ukraine. It is hard to sit here with a straight face and look up to the members opposite who have consistently recently voted against Ukraine. I mean, the great thing about our parliamentary system is that everything we do here is on tape, right? Like it's all on video. There's no guessing in terms of what people's positions are, whether you want it or not. And so for me, to listen to some of the debates and the points across the way about this is all for support of Ukraine, it just really rings hollow. And it took the leader of the opposition, I think, almost 2 years to reference the word Ukraine. It wasn't until we got to the free trade debate that the leader of the opposition could bring himself to say the word Ukraine in the House. And I think that speaks volumes in terms of where their party is at now. I'm reading an article here as the discussion was taking place about when our support for Ukraine and the Project Unifier was started under Prime Minister Harper. Wow, how things have changed in terms of where the party opposite is at right now as it relates to their lack of support now for Ukraine. And so I'll reiterate that to listen to the comments that have been made across the table as it relates to providing support for Ukraine in this instance with ammunition is a tough one, because they had every opportunity to support not just the government of Ukraine, but the citizens of Ukraine who live here in Canada with $500 million in December, and they chose to vote against it. They had the opportunities others have referenced to support Ukraine and the citizens of Ukraine here in Canada with support for the free trade agreement. They decided to vote against it. They'll find every wiggle worm word they can, to try to squirm their way out of these debates. They'll find every little excuse as to why they didn't support it, and now they come to the committee with something that says that they're in support of Ukraine. I think their actions speak louder than their words, Mr. Chair. There are a number of votes now recently. We can see where the leader of the opposition is taking his party. It is undermining the support of NATO. It is undermining the support of our allies. It is undermining Ukraine.
Point of order.
I'll leave it with that, because you could tell that.
Point of order. Point of order.
And I'd love for them to keep bringing the Ukraine motions.
Point of order.
Because it allows us to talk about
Point of order,
our
John.
support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I recognize your point of order. It is.
I would have rather you recognized it on a more timely basis and shut this down. You were very narrow on relevance early on this motion. I'd like you to continue to be narrow on relevance.
Thank you. I will continue to interpret this the way I see fit. We are next up with Ms. Matheson.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I again come to the point that I had made before, and I am really concerned. So I'm hoping that there's an amendment that will be coming forward shortly, because I'm concerned about the wording that Mr. Bazan is going forward with. He acknowledges that the CRV7s are dangerous. He acknowledges that, and he talked about not wanting them to stay within, just to sit on a base. But the fact is that that's not what's going to happen to them. Ultimately, there is an agreement right now that they are supposed to be transported to a disposal company so that they will be kept in a facility where it's safe. And we have to negotiate. And I'm fine that the Canadian government would potentially negotiate, if it's all done safely, for them to not go forward with that disposal. But that was the whole process. And so just providing these much like these slogans that conservatives have just to cover without any further explanation is dangerous. And to just say, well, let's get them off our plate and send them to somebody else without actually thinking that through is highly irresponsible. And so until I see some further language on this motion, that talks about the assurance that we are not just offloading our dangerous ammunitions that are problematic onto somebody else who is in a desperate situation and taking advantage of that desperation, then I can't. They may want them, but they want them to be safe. They need them to be safe, and we need to ensure, in terms of our relationship with the Ukrainians, that we respect that relationship, that we ensure that it's safe. And we don't just offload our problem onto them. I don't see that language here now, and until I see it, I don't understand how this committee could actually have the conscience to move forward with this.
Ms. Lalonde. No?
Okay. I thank you because, we do have military personnel who actually served in this committee. And I would say and agree on the safety and the transport. I wish to say, and Mr. Chair, I'm just going to say, I almost came forward to bring an amendment to show maybe our experts here in this committee how working together means having these discussions, but probably not, maybe overall tonight. But I wanted to say maybe we should bring an amendment, Mr. Chair, that we should allow the member, Mr. James Bazan, to be authorized by the committee to travel to inspect the munitions so we can guarantee they are safe to travel. But I will not do this because, you see, I like I say, for me, this committee was a serious committee when I joined in, and I know our force, our military wants us to actually improve. Ukraine needs our help. We have consistently, and my colleague have made a point of the support that we have provided. My colleagues also made reference to, how the leader of the official opposition has referred to a far, far away country. They voted against every measures in support of Ukraine. So, Mr. Speaker, I will be proposing an amendment that I hope my colleague will understand the seriousness of this committee and everything that we're doing in our way forward. We've been there for Ukraine. We're going to continue to be there. And I will say, so my proposed amendment, and I hope this will make this committee happy, and certainly our military who are here, and also Ms. Madison. I would like at the end of the motion of Mr. Bazan, at the final sentence, that we would be adding, provided that they are safe for transport and are operationally effective. And the reason why I'm saying this is because not only do we need to make sure that they are safe, they don't blow up in someone else that we don't want this to blow up into, that they're safe to be transported across other countries. We also need to make sure that the other countries are comfortable with this. So again, I am certainly not the expert, but I would like to propose these amendments to make sure that someone out there seeing the seriousness of this committee. Merci.
Yeah. Okay, let me just make clear. What's that? It is an amendment.
The amendment,
yeah. So, just so that we all understand it, provided that they're safe for transport and operationally effective. So that would be the addition. So, okay. Mr. Bazan.
So everything else stays the same. So can I speak to the amendment?
Yeah.
So first of all, I was going to suggest some rewording, insisting immediately donate to safely donate and transport. I'd also just add that, didn't appreciate the slam, going to, I know where Dundurn is. I'll drive there if I need to. It's not that far from Manitoba. And they want the other rockets, though, even if they're non-functional, because they can use them for parts. And so there is a request from the Ukrainian Armed Forces for everything that can be disposed of. So, Mr. Chair, I'm not opposed to the safety, and when in my research on this, there are NATO and UN standards that we have to meet for the safety aspect of transport, because we know that these will end up going into Ukraine from Poland, so they have to meet the NATO UN standards for safe transportation. I'll also just say, based upon the affirmative intervention by Mr. Collins, and that line, I'll just like to remind them about all the broken liver promises to Ukraine. And I promised on September 22nd, 2022, 35 high-resolution drone cameras valued at $76 million, not delivered. The chair allowed to go on. This is all factual information from the Department of Defense's own webpage, where you can track everything that's been promised and what's been delivered. November 24th, 2022, there was 11,000 assault rifles and machine guns with 9 million rounds not delivered. January 10th, 2023, already talked about the NASAM, $406 million not delivered. June 10th, 2023, 10,105 military rounds and 250 AIM-7 air defense missiles not delivered. So you can sit there and give all the nice words and announcements, but you guys aren't delivering. This is a chance to all of us get together. These are things that can easily be certified, packed up, and shipped over. Ukraine has asked for this stuff. You guys have said you're going to send it, and it hasn't even been sent. How is that helping?
Do we think we want to carry on for the balance of the time bickering back and forth, or do we want to actually deal with the motion as proposed amended? I have two speakers left, Mr. Fisher and Madame Lalonde. Did Ms. Normandine not want to speak? Okay. Mr. Fisher is done, and Lalonde. Done? Okay. So I see no other Oops. Yeah. So the amendment is first we vote on the amendment. Yeah. And so if you'd read it so that we all know what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Malheureusement, je l'ai seulement en anglais. So the amendment is adding at the end of the motion, so after "to the armed forces of Ukraine," adding "provided that they are safe for transport and are operationally effective."
Do you want to call the vote? You want to call a recorded vote? Those in favor? Okay, not a recorded vote. Good. Okay, we're now on to the motion as amended.
Do you want me to record it, or is everybody okay?
Okay.
Okay. So, Mr. Fisher.
Sure.
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Madame Lalonde.
Oui.
Mr. Fillmore.
Yes.
Mr. Noor Mohammed.
Yes.
Mr. Bazan.
Yes.
Ms. Gallant.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Falk.
Yes.
Okay.
Madame Normandin.
Oui.
And Ms. Matheson.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.